Is the Dungeon Master a storyteller? Is it their job to tell the story of the campaign to the players, to protect the narrative in an active way? What is the story exactly? Whose story is it? Should the DM fudge the dice? The answer to all of these questions and more coming right up on RPG Retro Reviews. Hello everyone, I'm Captain Courageous and I review old school modules and games and try to give them a fun and informative analysis. This week's video is way late and it was supposed to be on the Forgotten Realms supplement, The Savage North. Unfortunately, the 8 pages of script I had written and was basically completed somehow got corrupted and now looks like this. A bit frustrating, so I had no choice. I dusted off another script I was in the middle of, and this is it. It's a discussion as to the true nature of the Dungeon Master's role in the campaign. Now, before I continue, let me stress and say that if you are having fun the way you're doing things, and so are the players, then by all means, don't let me try to tell you what fun is. However, with all of that being said, I do believe that too frequently, Dungeon Masters, especially new DMs, but veterans DMs as well, are guilty of interjecting their preconceived narrative of the campaign over the desires of the players. Some call this railroading, but in my opinion it goes further than that. So in this video, I'm going to go over exactly what my feelings are on a DM's role at the table ideally is, and how to avoid falling into the various pitfalls and traps of enforcing a preconceived narrative over the desires of your players. This is a video I've been wanting to make for quite some time, and as I see this discussed endlessly on forums, on Facebook groups, and so forth, the topic is nuanced and really deserves a much more in-depth discussion than what can really be written in a forum post. But to clarify, let's state specifically what I'm talking about here. The Dungeon Master conceives of a campaign in which the players discover a particular evil in the setting and have one adventure after the next, ultimately leading to the big showdown with a powerful entity of some sort, commonly referred to as the big bad evil guy or gal. An epic battle takes place, the players emerge victorious, and the lands are liberated from the shadow of evil. Now, this is only one possible scenario, and there are endless variations, but the point is, the DM has a concept preconceived before the campaign begins, and by and large, the players are merely tokens that play out the narrative. The DM will fudge dice rolls and generally discourage any deviation from this set path, thus limiting the player's ability to genuinely affect and influence the setting in a meaningful way. The Dungeon Master feels they are telling an epic story and are excited to have the players there to act all of that out. Certainly when a Dungeon Master is new to the game, having a preset narrative and direction is comforting and to some extent easier. However, in my opinion, this is pretty boring and not all that exciting for the Dungeon Master or the players in the long run for 2 reasons. First of all, there's no surprises for the DM. The DM already knows what's going to happen beforehand, and the players are just there to go through the motions. The players might catch on to this and realize that what they do doesn't really matter too much, as they can't really deviate from the DM's pre-planned story arc, and that can lead to player frustration. For those who have been watching my channel for a while, it's certainly no secret that I like an open world setting where the players choose what directions they wish to go, what part of the world they want to explore, and so forth. I like to be surprised as much as the players as to what's going to happen next. I'm not telling a story. I'm narrating the events as they unfold. I'm going on the journey with the player characters, not directing where they go. That's not my role. I don't want to say I'm a disinterested third party to the events, but I am a neutral one. Sure, I'd love to see the players succeed, but it's not my role to actively help them to succeed. Now, I can imagine that some DMs might be in the comments right now calling me out for such heresy. What about the story? What if the monster is too strong and you inadvertently TPK the party? What then? There are so many ways to handle these kinds of situations that don't involve a purposeful intervention on the DM's part. But before I get into all of that, let's just talk about open world gaming in general. Now, I've already done a couple of videos on how to run a sandbox campaign, and I highly recommend you check them out if you find this topic interesting. But what I've discovered from the comments in those videos is that exactly what a sandbox is different from many people, so let me state my feelings on it up front. First, there's not a thing wrong having a pre-planned adventure, a dungeon to explore, or what have you. This is good. Not a thing wrong with being prepared. The key here is the DM's ability and willingness to deviate from this pre-planning if the players decide to go in a different direction. Now, of course, before everyone got together to play their first D&D session, hopefully there was a session 0. Now, I don't think you really need to have all the players get together at once at the table and talk about their characters and their backgrounds at that time. Much of this pre-planning for the campaign can be done online, over the phone, or what have you, before session 1, talking with the individual players during the weeks leading up to the first actual play session. Characters can be created, backgrounds discussed, the players can talk with each other and maybe coordinate their backgrounds. I like to create an overview of the setting and offer the players several options for roles they might want to play. For example, the campaign may begin in the Forgotten Realms in the city of Waterdeep. Maybe the player character is from one of the many noble families, or perhaps they are Griffin riders with the City Watch, or perhaps part of the city's seedy underworld. However, if you're a new DM, it might be best to start off on a smaller scale, say in a town or a small keep, for example. For this reason, there are 2 old school modules that I highly recommend new DMs check out, either to run directly or to use as a template for the starting point of their own campaigns: Keep on the Borderlands and the Village of Hamlet. In both cases, the author, Gary Gygax, offers a complete base of operations for the newly formed adventuring party. The keep on the Borderlands is great, a fortified keep with all the things the PCs need to explore the vast wilderness that surrounds the place, and several potential mini-adventure encounters as well, such as the Mad Hermit or the Lizard Man Den. And of course, there is the vast network of caves east of the keep, the Caves of Chaos, filled with all sorts of evil nasties, tricks, traps, and treasure. The Village of Hamlet offers a more detailed setting with every NPC resident named, where they live, what their role in the village is, and more. Though the module's primary adventuring locale, the Moat House, isn't quite as vast as the Caves of Chaos, quite a few adventures can be had there. And of course, this is the starting adventure for the T-series of modules and can potentially lead to the Temple of Elemental Evil. Either way, these modules are great for a new DM to at least take a look at and analyze, and use this as a template to create their own unique towns for their campaign world. And really, this is all you need to start things off: a base of operations and some place to go and explore. And as the characters go up in level, the DM can gradually introduce new elements to the setting. And ideally, these elements are inspired by things the player characters are doing and talking about wanting to go and do during their initial game sessions. You, the DM, really have no set plan on what happens next. That comes through actual play. By necessity, you will introduce many NPCs on the fly or inspired by the backgrounds of the player characters. In this way, the campaign's narrative is more collaborative. There's a road leading north out of town. Where does it go? At the start of the campaign, at best, the idea is vague, and you don't really need to know too much about it until someone asks or wants to go north, and then you offer some explanation and develop that area. Perhaps there is a trading settlement to the north, bringing furs and goods to those lands further south. Who knows? The important thing is that you, the DM, and the players explore this together, and you really only know when you need to actually know. So let's change the terminology a little bit. You're not telling a story. You, the DM, are guiding the narrative, but it is the player characters that actually drive the narrative's direction. You are not a storyteller, you are a story enabler. The story is what happens after the game session is over. Then the players have a story to tell about what happened. During the session, you, the DM, helped the narrative unfold by introducing and providing information through your NPCs or direct exposition. Of course, you can provide a map of the surrounding area, which might look something like this. A few towns along the road, a temple, and lost tower in the forest, and a few ruins here and there with some brief notes. If you're not the artistic type, you can easily find a good starting map on the internet and go from there. It's also a good idea to have a vague idea of the political structure of the lands. Is the town the PCs are in independent or beholden to a duke or baron? Who the controlling powers are is important to consider, as this could lead to potential conflicts, such as rival dukes vying for power. Brigands along the road are actually in the employ of one of the dukes, who organize bands raiding travelers to the rival's town. Then the other duke might offer rewards for the capture and killing of such brigands, and the collection of a bounty for such criminals might make for a great adventure and lead to something more if the heroes can uncover the plot with the rival duke. Another great technique is to have a message board in the center of town, and there adventurers can look for jobs. Perhaps there is a call to arms to fight orcs raiding a nearby village, or something as simple as Farmer Delvin having issues with giant rats in his barn, or the local mayor is seeking to help with the aforementioned brigands, or a local wizard needs an escort to some nearby ruins in which magical secrets are said to be buried within. I like to start with a minimum of 3 choices. This is a good number. Too many choices can overwhelm the PCs and lead to inaction, but not enough options can feel a bit railroady. The point is, the players choose and get to go explore where they want to go. This allows you, the DM, to do some minimum prep for each narrative hook, enough to get by for the first session, and then you fully developed, between the sessions, the areas the players wish to explore. And of course, as the PCs finish tasks on the message board, more messages begin to appear. It's a lot of fun to make some message board props with the actual message posts as handouts to the players, which they can refer back to during the game session. Another thing you can do with your first session is to begin with action of some type, possibly combat, against an obviously vile but probably easily killable foe. And this could be the impetus for the first meeting of the PCs as they come upon the scene at the same time. For example, the PCs encounter one another along the road, perhaps discovering that they are traveling to the same village or town, wishing to explore an old abandoned wizard's tower said to contain vast treasure. And this is when they are approached by a desperate individual in ragged clothes, claiming that they have recently escaped captivity from some evil snake cult. It could be that bounty hunters in search of the escaped temple slave arrive on the scene and demand the captive's return. Of course, the PCs can avoid the combat altogether by turning over the captive, get themselves invited to the temple to speak to the high priestess, and perhaps gain bounty work of their own. Or they can protect the captive and fight the bounty hunters. Either way, you're beginning with action and a conflict that bears further investigation and can lead to something else, or not. It's the player's choice. This kind of setup has several advantages as a first adventure. 1, it brings the PCs together and gives them a reason to stay together to combine forces and confront the temple. 2, it presents an obvious antagonist and gives focus to the game session. It is very important that you do not overwhelm the players with too many choices, especially in the first game session. Otherwise, you risk things bogging down from inaction. And 3, almost immediately, the PCs are making connections to the NPCs in the town, the mayor, the farmer, and so on. People will take notice. If things go well, the PCs will find themselves in the good graces of most of the townsfolk, and this will be a big advantage. In addition, spies for the cult in town will be alerted to their presence, setting up further conflicts. Of course, there is a lot to be said about this in the other videos that I recommended, but the important message here is that by beginning with action, you can avoid many overused fantasy game tropes such as, you are sitting around the tavern when a mysterious stranger walks in, that kind of thing. You're giving the PCs a reason to meet each other and join forces, and you provided a focus for the session that can give you momentum going forward. After the resolution of the Snake Cult Temple adventure, what's next? Perhaps finally getting to that old wizard's tower that was the reason everyone came to the town to begin with. Don't forget about the message board in the middle of town. What kind of opportunities can be found there? I can't stress enough the importance of a DM's notebook. Here you can jot down the names of new NPCs you create on the fly, their personality traits, and a brief note of what happens during the session, as well as areas for further development. Maybe even pose questions to yourself about the motives of some of the NPCs that at the time you haven't fully developed yet. By doing things this way, by keeping things vague until you really need to know them, you're not overdeveloping your world and boxing yourself in. You aren't giving yourself an undue workload, and you are keeping things interesting for yourself because even you really don't know exactly what's going to happen next. Also important to keep in mind the players' backgrounds and take the time to work those in as you can. Perhaps the PC's missing sister has been taken by the evil snake cult. Or perhaps, more interestingly, the PC's missing sister is actually a high priestess in the evil snake cult. Involving the PC in the campaign's narrative on a personal level is key to maintaining players' interest. Now let me also mention campaign narrative arcs, a series of connected adventures that lead to a specific ending and have a definite conclusion provides the players with a feeling of accomplishment. For example, the aforementioned Snake Cult's temple is plundered by the PCs. The High Priestess escapes, and through a series of adventures, she is tracked down and there's a final confrontation. That part of the campaign is over, but what's next? Was this temple isolated or part of a larger network of cultists? What will the high priests of the cult do when they learn of their temple's destruction, the murder of their priestess? This can lead to a narrative that takes months to resolve, but once it is resolved, it's not the end of the campaign. During the course of pursuing the cultists, other conflicts begin to arise. The PCs are finding their way in a larger world. A border dispute between neighboring kingdoms might become important. Who knows? And of course, there's my favorite technique where I somehow tie all of this together in one final arc that represents the end of the campaign. For me, I do this at around 13th or 14th level, as I feel that's when play can get a bit bogged down with the player character's abilities and accumulation of magic items. But it's really up to you where you feel comfortable wrapping things up for a group of characters. At this point, there's been 3, maybe 4 narrative arcs completed that may or may not be connected to each other. Now is the time to dig through your notes, which at this point might go back a few years and should be considerable, and look for loose ends, things the PCs encountered that you never followed up on, or they might have bypassed initially, and mine them for new NPCs and plot threads. I like to play a game of what if with myself and what happens next in my head, and try to bring in elements that I think will be intriguing and perhaps surprising to the players, and if I can find a personal connection to the players' backgrounds, all the better. Here you pull out all the stops and pull no punches. Everything is on the line as the campaign reaches its zenith and wraps up, hopefully satisfactorily, even if one or more of the characters end up sacrificing themselves to bring this final threat to an end. Now the narrative of the arc of the campaign is over. There is an epic story to tell. And this brings me to one final point that is near and dear to my heart, and that is the issue of DM dice fudging. This is another controversial topic, and I know DMs that have decades of experience who still think fudging dice is necessary. And even the rules themselves suggest that the DM fudge dice in order to keep things on track, or to avoid a TPK, or a poor outcome to a story arc in the campaign, or some other excuse. To all of that I say, nonsense. Certainly it's good to hide certain roles such as stealth or search checks, roles where success or failure has an uncertainty. A rogue always thinks they are being quiet, but are they really? These sorts of checks, in my opinion, are the purview of the DM. Sometimes I'm going to just outright give the information to the PCs regardless of a role, but I might wish to pretend a role to give the players the idea that failure was a possibility. This sort of deception is key to maintaining a certain level of mystery and uncertainty that keeps the game intriguing for the players. The mystique of what happens behind the DM screen can be a fun element of the game itself. However, when it comes to more tactical roles, as those with combat, I roll those out in the open for my players. All my attack, damage, monster saves are all there for the players to see. No fudging. What happens is a combination of the narrative and the dice. This is their story in the end, and it's not my place to intervene. To some DMs who are certainly eager to begin their tirade in the comment section that what I'm suggesting here is sacrilege, well, what about the story? Well, what about it? Whose story arc are we telling here anyway? Yours or the players? Player character death is a story. Actually, it's 3. It's the end of the story for one character, the beginning of a story for another, and the other players continue on with their story as well. Who's to say that the players won't have a last-second rally and surprise you? I know I've been on the edge of my seat many times when I thought the players were done for, and some last-second idea, reprieve, or lucky dice roll completely changed things in their favor. Those are the best moments. Those are the times the table goes crazy, and those are the times that players will remember years later and talk about. Those moments won't happen, or can happen, if the DM keeps intervening on the player's behalf and fudging the dice. Furthermore, I would submit that when a DM fudges like this, they are depriving their players of any chance of real accomplishment from that point. Over time, the players will realize they have plot armor, even if you never tell them. Of course, every table is different, and some tables don't even want player characters to have a chance of dying. If that's your idea of fun, then certainly don't let me tell you it's not. I'm only saying that for many players, a big part of the thrill of the game is the possibility of character death. And if a DM deprives the player of their character's death, they are stealing their fun. Certainly, if death does come to a player character, be sure to give them a last chance at final words or an act of heroism above and beyond before they go to their final rest. Sure, it's a bummer, and certainly the death of a character or characters can dampen a game session. Let me submit to you that having a bummer game session is not a bad thing. Consider there will be many other game sessions, certainly a lot more sessions that are fun and everyone enjoys them. So a one-off that ends in a bit of a bummer isn't necessarily a bad thing. The PCs will move on, bury their fallen friend, and there's a somber reflection on the events that have transpired. They lick their wounds, they strengthen their resolve against the evil that brought about their comrade's end. Now the personal stake of everyone else involved is heightened. The real dangers of the adventuring life is on full display, and as the campaign progresses, the player with the dead character brings in a new character. Things move on, and when the time finally arrives to face off against a hated enemy once more, defeating them will be all the sweeter. I can't help but equate dice fudging to turning to the dark side of the Force in Star Wars. Once you turn down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. It's a crutch. Let go of it. Have confidence in your ability as a dungeon master, as a story enabler, to let events unfold in such a manner that even you are not in control. Consider this. Where and when do you draw the line? When is fudging actually in service of the players, rather than in service of a DM not having the confidence to let the dice fall where they may and then dealing with the consequences? What if the DM fudges the roll, but if they just waited a little bit longer, the players would have managed on their own without need for the DM's secret intervention? What if a player character dying actually results in a better story? The other players becoming more invested in the campaign, now having a personal stake in the destruction of the evil since it's responsible for the death of their friend. DMs might actually believe they are fudging dice rolls in service of the game, the plot, the story, the players, or whatever. But the hard, uncomfortable truth is, if one is really being honest with themselves, they are simply managing the course of the campaign so it stays within their comfort zone. To me, there is a certain zen moment as a dungeon master when you realize that it's okay to let go, to not be in control. and suddenly the campaign comes alive in your mind so that you are just the chronicler of the campaign's events. This continuing narrative takes on a life of its own. Events ebb and flow in an unpredictable current that becomes the tale of your campaign. And due to the input of all the players, it gradually evolves in directions that you never could have conceived of on your own. Make that your goal, so that when all is said and done, and the campaign finally does find its conclusion, you'll be as surprised as the players as to how the story ultimately unfolded. And then, you really will have an epic story to tell. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found some of the ideas presented here useful for your campaign. What do you think? Please leave your comments below. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all my patrons. So very sorry for the delay in getting this video out to you. Hopefully, I'll be able to reconstitute my Savage Frontier video script in the near future. I'm going to do a review of Dreams of the Red Wizards as well. And until then, please smash that like button, subscribe, and share. Please check out my Teespring store for some great Game On merchandise featuring artwork from James V. West and Phil Stone. Please join the channel's Facebook page, RPG Retro Reviews. Consider becoming a patron yourself. There are two ways to leave a tip if you would like to, either through my PayPal tip jar or just use YouTube's Super Thanks button right here. As always, my friends, may your T20 roll true and game on.